Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining us. I'm going to start out by introducing our panelists. Tara Snavely is the Director of Quality Excellence at Althea, the leading customer manufacturer of super premium pet food in the U.S. She brings extensive experience in the pet food and nutrition industry from previous roles at American Nutrition, Jam Smuckers, and Big Heart Brands. Thanks for joining us, Tara. And Shannon Harrison is the VP of Food Safety and Quality at Simmons Foods, one of the largest privately held broiler processing companies and largest private label wet food manufacturer in North America. She brings extensive experience from previous roles at ConAgra Foods before joining Simmons as Director of Quality in 2016. Shannon holds his master's in food safety from the University of Arkansas. We are going to go ahead and just jump right into the questions. So our first question is for you, Shannon. For those who are not in the pet food environment, help us understand what is the difference overall from the foreign material standpoint from human food and pet food.
Yeah. Hi, Paula. Thanks for having me on today and allowing me an opportunity to share this with everyone. Overall, the company's responsibility is no different. The responsibility to react and respond to a foreign material incident is just the same in pet food as it is in our human food facilities. The expectation to implement foreign material detection systems and controls such as screens and metal detectors, x-rays, all those things are the same. I think the interesting thing when we think about foreign material or contaminants in our customers, it's interesting to think about the fact that we forget that pets are actually a very close second to babies when it comes to food safety requirements and the expectations of the customer. The end user can't really give us feedback, and so we get the feedback from pet parents and parents, of course. So it's pet food it's a serious business when it comes to foreign material. Any kind of contamination and expectations are really high from our customers.
Do you see anything different from a regulatory standpoint as far as foreign material goes or guidelines that you guys use or follow?
Yeah, the FDA's compliance guideline that was updated in 2005 still just covers that 7 to 25 millimeters, hard, sharp. We follow that because it's a good guideline. But I think the thing about pet food that's different is those standards were set for humans and the impact that it may have on higher risk humans. But pets are different, right? 7 to 25 is, if you have a tiny little Chihuahua, that 7 millimeter might have a different risk. So it's a good guideline, but I think we have to stop and think about the end user again, and kittens versus cats and puppies versus large dogs. And so that's the additional thing that we have to consider. But regulatory doesn't provide us any additional guidelines specific to pets.
Thanks, Shannon. Tara, the next question is for you. What are typical foreign material challenges that encounter with your product line? What's the difference that you would see in a human production facility?
Thanks again for having me, Paula. Pet food manufacturing has the same challenges from equipment standpoints as far as failures or metal risk inherent to the process. But I think a large difference is the raw material concerns associated with pet food, meat meals especially, or raw meats. Most of the raw materials coming into the pet industry are byproducts or waste streams from the human consumption. So pet deals a lot with foreign material really around bone, or on the grain side, any rocks.
Yeah. And also one thing, maybe you could talk to us a little bit about the size of or how you receive the products, like, in bulk versus maybe boxes or bags of ingredients.
Absolutely. So a large portion of the grain side is coming in through truck or rail. So we're talking large quantities there. We do have sifting, screening, magnets, and metal detection in line to protect from any foreign material at the receipt process. As far as raw materials centered around meats and meats meals, we do have screening and sifting for bone particulate. We rely heavily on our suppliers on the front side to eliminate and reduce any foreign material that's inherent to the natural process, such as bone. Now, one thing that's a little difficult is fish, and fish is a large portion of the pet food industry, especially in cat foods. Fish bone is soft and pliable, so reducing the size is probably the most important part in a fish slurry or meal, and then downstream sifting where we can and mitigating the hazard there.
That's a really good point, and that I think is a big difference between human food and pet food. The fish aspect and the density of the bone, no matter what protein that you are using. With that, Tara, how do you deal with supplier foreign material risk, and how have you been able to work with suppliers to have a better outcome?
Absolutely. As a standard, whenever a foreign material concern is identified at the receiving process, within our quality programs of visual inspection, sifting through offline sieves, we will save any foreign material for the supplier. If they want the actual raw material, physical foreign material back, we will send it to them. Also, photos with particle size associated goes through the communication with our suppliers, whether we continue to utilize the material or we outright reject. Now, if we do have concerns around a specific supplier, it is track trended at Althea. And we also work to partner with best practices within our own processes so that our supplier understands our limitations at the processing step, whatever we can do to help mitigate upfront in there. We really value our suppliers and want to work hand in hand with them so we can just continuously improve through the process.
Shannon, what are some ways that you try to proactively prevent the foreign material from getting into the product?
Yeah, as Tara discussed, suppliers is really important as they're a large contributor to entering into this product stream. We do that through supplier scorecard management. We provide updates to our suppliers on a quarterly basis, ranking them and giving them scores, and then we use that to risk assess, continuing using those suppliers. But I think in addition to that, it comes to the product, the ways that product or foreign materials introduced into the product at the facility. So I think two things: preventive maintenance programs are critical to ensuring that we reduce, obviously, the frequency of self-inflicted incidents, but it can also reduce the size and the scope of those when they do occur, to have a good preventive maintenance program for your own equipment. But key is employee recognition program. So employees are first line of defense to see those things in the process. And so, we have a program that we highlight a team member every month who has helped us to prevent an event, as we call it, and to reduce the size and scope of events when we have them. That program provides them with, recognition with leadership, a certificate. They get a gift card to the company store so they can get themselves some swag. And then we have a couple of facilities who've taken it to the next level. They actually have an annual dinner where the team member from each month throughout that year comes to a dinner together with leadership, and they just celebrate them and highlight what they've done to help prevent events. So I think employee recognition is important because they're our eyes. And I think in some ways that's a little different as I think about our human food facilities, poultry processing. There's a lot of people on the line with a lot of visibility to that product all the way up until the time that it's in the package. Pet food processing is often different. We think about canning and even the dry processing. Up front is the only time that there's any visibility as we're adding ingredients, because once it's contained and cooked, there's no visibility to it. So a little less. So it's good to highlight them when they do identify issues for us.
I think that's a really great point, Shannon. And I hear from lots of pet food and food manufacturers that the food safety culture and recognizing and getting the employees involved is just a key to their success. And I saw actually on LinkedIn this morning that your Iowa facility was already selling World Food Safety Day. So that's fantastic, and it's great to see it going into a bigger scope, so other people can appreciate and understand what you guys are doing from the plant level. So that was really fun to see this morning. On to our next question, Tara. What are some examples of different circumstances where foreign material is detected, and how does your team typically spring into action to figure out the course of action?
Of course, containment is key. So the first step when identified foreign material concerns happen in the processing manufacturing locations is to contain the product. We'll bracket on either side of the known risk so that we know that all of the product is within our control. From there, we really encourage cross-functional collaboration within the site as well as the corporate team. So that includes, obviously food safety, quality, as well as the operations teams, maintenance and engineering, and procurement, where risks are identified or we know the source of contamination. Once we've got...
I was going to say, is there an instance that you can remember where somebody outside the food safety team, was involved in this, and they brought maybe a different perspective or light that helped you with the investigation or the next plan of action that maybe you hadn't seen before?
Yeah, our maintenance and engineering teams really are strong in the equipment itself. So when you've got some, let's say metal, for example, where we're trying to identify the source, bringing in the boots on the ground and the maintenance technicians, they can so readily identify the source or identify whether it has come from our facility or someone else's facility upstream that may have been in the product. So I think it's really critical to have that maintenance or engineering support when dealing with foreign material like metal. In instances where it's raw material, or again with bone, since that's a good example, the procurement team really does a great job in identifying how the bone could be introduced or what part of the animal the bone came from, so we can go back to the supplier and understand where the failure was in their own process. It's identifying the root cause, which
kind of answers. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
It's the root cause and identification that really helps the plant in decision making to go forward with products, sampling, understanding scope, and then ultimately preventing it from happening again.
I was just going to say that pretty much answers one of the questions that's already in the chat. So thanks for getting ahead of that. Shannon, when a foreign material event does occur, what are your options as far as salvaging product, and what's different from the options than a human food producer has?
Yeah. Given that the products that we produce are sealed and thermally processed, we don't really have two options, X-ray or destructive sampling, to help us understand the scope of an incident. We don't have the option to open and physically sort through product that others may have. I think the difference isn't really, in that case, human food versus pet food, but it's really about your product's packaging type and your product format of your finished product that can limit your options.
Tara, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I think Shannon hit the nail on the head. In the food that her team manufactures, it is very invasive on a sampling program, where dry extruded kibble might be a little bit less challenging than opening a thermal process can. However, it's still pretty invasive. Once we open that finished retail packaging, we don't want to introduce or reintroduce back into the product stream, because it also brings other hazards that the pet food industry might have as far as cross-contamination or microbial risk.
So you've somewhat already answered this, Shannon, but how does the inability to downgrade product make the decision versus your poultry side a little bit different?
Yeah, honestly, it can't. Food safety is food safety, and our responsibility to our customers is the same. I think it just adds a level of cost and complexity to the pet food business that a lot of people don't understand because you don't have that option, right? It can't change my decision about the product and whether it's safe to sell or not, but it adds complexity and cost to pet food.
Kind of the reverse side of that is some food products can be downgraded and then they can be actually an ingredient in some pet foods. How does that affect kind of your decision making process when accepting those ingredients and trying to be ahead of the foreign material game?
Yeah, I think it goes back to what Tara talked about in the beginning on suppliers and the fact that we know we are a waste, the ingredients we receive are from a waste stream. And so it's really about education up front. Even, I'm blessed to be a part of an fully integrated company. And so I actually have responsibility for that part of our business as well, right? So we make ingredients that go into pet food, and we take waste streams from our poultry facilities, and we take that and turn it into ingredients for pet food. So even internally, we still have those challenges, knowing what the end game is of keeping that mindset in our poultry facilities and that visibility and expectation that it's not trash. It's an ingredient that's going to be further processed. And so really the education of them to, don't throw your gloves in there. Don't pick up trash off the floor and throw it into a condemned barrel because it's going to be used further in the process. So it's really about that education.
Yeah, and I think that brings up a little good point. I was at a pet food conference a couple weeks ago, and they were discussing just those things about the fully integrated companies and that, the downstream or their expectations for their internal customers are just as high or higher, and they kind of know the ins and outs of what they might expect a little bit more. But also just about the gloves and things like that getting thrown in. One of the companies had shared that instead of using like old combos or things like that for trash, they had went to specific barrels to prevent some of those possible misses by an employee, not intentionally. Have either of you implemented different procedures or things like that to help with those kind of things?
I think the level of education at the employee standpoint, understanding where to dispose of trash versus what could be reintroduced back into the system is critical. Color coding, labeling, making it clear and obvious what is a trash receptacle versus what's going back into the product, and then training and retraining, open dialogue and communication within the facilities themselves. And as Shannon said, having that same dialogue and communication with the suppliers, it's one thing to have a spec that's pretty broad, that just all encompassing says foreign material of any kind, but really educating suppliers proactively and what is tolerable versus intolerable goes a long way.
Thanks. Tara, how do you view internal reinspection as an option versus third-party service, and how do you use each of the tools for resolving foreign material?
Sure. We do have, as we said before, internal foreign material detection really centered around metal. So we've got in-process detection, sifting, screening, magnets, and then terminal devices. So when we find an instance that we can inspect non-invasively at an internal standpoint, we will rerun, we will make decisions. That does not necessarily mean that product is going to get out the door. It's just we would like to grab more data to understand what's going on with the failure. There's also the option of the invasive, opening bags, inspecting visually. However, that has some cost associated because no matter what, you're losing product from the hold. whether you release completely or narrow scope or destroy completely. Now, third-party inspection offers a little bit more technology than what we can have in the facility. So it's a higher sensitivity, can identify non-metal contaminants that gives us real science to make informed decisions while maintaining the integrity of the packaging, which protects the kibble in the bag from other risks.
Shannon, based on data from inspection, how do you use that data to run your root cause analysis?
Yeah, several things. First of all, we typically would take that information to identify, are there certain timeframes with higher rejections or more identification? So is there a trend? Is there a certain period of time that is at more risk than others? That helps us go back and say, were we running a particular ingredient at that time? Did we have a changeover in ingredient lot numbers, things like that? We also utilize Dino-Light cameras. If you don't have those, I highly recommend them. It's a camera, but it also is like, a microscope, and it gives you size and shape. It really zooms in beyond just a basic camera, gives you dimensions and some different things. And we'll use those to identify if four materials actually match. Does the metal or the plastic look the same, not just from my eyes, but from a microscopic level? And so we do a little forensic analysis sometimes, and we've been able to make connections even across business units, honestly, within our facility or within our business. And then we also usually, like when we get product back or findings back from product we might send to Flex, we'll look at the size of the findings and say, would we have expected that our systems catch that? And if we should have, then do I need to be checking my own systems and saying, do we need to recalibrate? Do we need to do some testing and some validation? Do I need to go back and redo a process capability, things like that? So those are a few of the things that we do in terms of investigation with the data that we get back.
What was the name of that camera again, Shannon?
It's called a Dino-Light camera.
Okay.
D-I-N-O. Yeah.
Do you have any other fun things that you use that maybe, not all pet food or food processors are using for investigation purposes?
I think that's probably, from a foreign material perspective, that's probably it. Everything else is, I think, fairly standard to industry.
What about you, Tara? Do you guys have any fun things that the group might want to learn about? No, I think, we're utilizing the same kind of technology that Shannon's already talked about. And that's where, the third party such as Flex comes in, because you guys are the experts and have seen far more than what some of us have seen relative to the small industry. So having the ability to identify size, contaminant, and amount, and utilizing all of that data in tandem with our own investigations is really helpful.
And I think that's, we hear that a lot. And if you haven't used us before, or you only use us limited, that's something you found more than we thought, or we didn't know. And I had a specific pet food incident where we were looking for some metal in some larger bags of kibble, and we found some stones. And so that threw the company into a whole different investigation line of what was going on and that kind of thing. And the customer actually came down to the facility and watched us inspect the product just, to confirm what we were seeing and help them understand better. And we always welcome guests to come, or customers to come see those kind of things. But there are other challenges, whether it's with us or when you're doing your internal investigation, that you might come upon, and then you might need to make other decisions based on that. So being ready for those, but hoping they don't happen, is always a good idea.
Yeah, I always say, don't ask a question you don't want to know the answer to, or may not already know the answer to, because you then have the responsibility to do something about that. So that's a question we ask ourselves when we're talking about, what are we going to do with this product, and is the risk worth the squeeze?
Yeah, absolutely. is the risk worth it, or does it make more sense just to
destroy and move
count
on.
your losses and move on? Yes,
Yep.
absolutely. It's kind of like back in when I was in the micro world. If you're going to test product or you're going to do swabs, but you don't have the corrective actions if those things aren't as you expect. So it's the same thing when you're investigating for foreign material. What are you going to do once you find the problem?
Right.
Tara, have you worked to encourage how have you worked to encourage a strong food safety culture across your organization?
Food safety culture has been a hot topic in recent years, and it's a really serious topic so it's important to have that conversation. Transparency and communication go a long way in food safety culture. At Althea, transparency and the communication at the cross-functional senior level is key. We have weekly quality KPI metrics that are going out, fully visible across the network, that is going to each of the sites as well as the senior leadership. The motivation there is best practice. We don't want to work in silos. Each site has, their own little opportunities, but there's also opportunities in which they'll see the same issues if we don't have the communication, we might be finding two different root causes when they could be the same. So the dialogue around the food safety metrics and the opportunities across the sites really drives the awareness and maturing that food safety culture so that Althea can be proactive and limit the amount of, for lack of a better term, firefighting and chasing the same issues.
Shannon, you kind of talked about it earlier, but is there anything else you want to add about food safety culture?
No, I think employee ownership and engagement, and honestly, it's rooted in Simmons values. There's five core values at Simmons, and 3 of those are putting people first. So recognizing our employees when they do good work for us, and taking action and being responsible. So those three core values really drive that employee engagement and ownership that are so important.
That's fantastic. And I know that, tons of companies have those kind of values and goals, but are they actually standing by them and implementing and recognizing? So it's great to hear that both of your companies are really behind those things. And I've seen it firsthand. So, keep up the good work. And I commend you and your management for doing that. Tara, how do you incorporate food safety into your overall message for customers? And what role, if any, does food safety play in establishing brand loyalty?
Sure, the pet food space is highly competitive. One thing that sets Althea apart as a co-manufacturer is the food safety is paramount and part of our messaging to customers. Again, full transparency within our customers that we represent their brands for in the background, as well as the forward consumers. We have routine meetings with each of our customers on food safety quality at the sites that are manufacturing their brands, sharing any potential CAPAs and learnings to be a trusted partner in the food safety space, especially with today's world of social media and how an immediate news stream can bring attention to a potential complaint within the market space. Taking that food safety seriously at the beginning and working with our partners to understand what the consumers need and where the risks would be as far as consumer experience is really what Althea stands for.
Great. Shannon, how about you?
Yeah, I think honestly we're in the same.
Sorry. Go for it.
I was gonna say we're kind of in the same boat, right? Althea's dry side, Simmons is focused on wet, but we're both in the same space of needing to be transparent with our customers. We don't own our own brands, right? So we are working for the brand of our customers. And I think that's honestly one of Simmons' taglines: we work for your brand. And so we're very passionate about ensuring that we manage their brands the same way we would do our own, right? Like we have a sense of ownership in that. And yeah, just being transparent, collaborative. We spend a lot of time with some of our customers. They spend a lot of time in our facilities, and you kind of become more like family than customer and supplier. So,
Shannon, what is one key action that a food safety leader can take to do today to reduce the incidence of foreign material?
Bringing visibility to your current state, and then setting metrics and targets. I think, it's often said you don't improve and make changes against things that you don't measure. So I think that's very true many times. And so we are very active in measuring foreign material findings, whether that's internal or customer complaints. We have programs with targets set that if we don't meet them each month, then we have action items to address meeting those, even with internal findings. So I just really think visibility and tracking communication around where we stand today and where we want to be tomorrow and how do we get there.
You said tracking and evaluating yourself. I've participated and we've hosted a couple of these, but we use the NAMI meat maturity model, and it's not specific to pet food, but I think that's still a good reference document if you're looking at a way, how can I evaluate myself and where I'm at and where I want to be. And it has a rating of 1 to 5. So anybody out there that's kind of looking for some place to start with, hey, we need to evaluate this. We're not really sure where we're at and where we need to go. I would highly recommend that. And feel free to reach out to anyone at FlexRay, and we can help you get in touch with that information. Tara, what about you? What's one key action that a food safety leader can take to reduce the incidence of foreign material?
Sure. I'm very hands-on at sites. So what I say to my team is know the process, right? You don't have to be the expert on every single part of the equipment, but if you understand the process and where the risks are and how you can reduce the likelihood, it goes so much better for investigations when a failure does occur. It doesn't negate the need for cross-functional collaboration during investigation, but it helps to understand what the other team members who are working day to day with the system are talking about. So yeah, knowing the process, getting out there and seeing the process.
I don't see any questions that we haven't already answered in the Q&A, so I'm just going to let you guys chat in just for a few minutes. Shannon, you have any closing thoughts around foreign material you'd like to share with the group?
I appreciate the collaboration, I think, industry-wise, right? I think everyone recognizes we're all in the same boat. It's a challenge for everyone. We all still have the same challenges. If anybody has great ideas on more detection systems for upstream in the process, much appreciated. I think for us, that's still an opportunity in terms of, as adding ingredients and screening systems, and how do we have those that fit all of our different sizes of ingredients. And so, if you've got a great idea for upstream detection, I welcome it. That's still a challenge. So.
You bring up a good point. Pet Food Alliance is a great resource. They do a lot of collaboration, and they meet right after Pet Food Forum in Kansas City, but they also meet a couple other times a year. The Pet Food or the Foreign Material PDG at IFP. But are there other organizations or things that you guys participate in that could be helpful for, somebody trying to navigate this or get, in with a group that maybe they could collaborate more with?
I think
those are the only ones I know.
Yeah, I think that's probably all that I would know as well. I just appreciate, like I said, even with our customers, right? We have spent a lot of time with Co-Man, and the more that we have big food companies buying pet food businesses and pet food brands, the expectations change. And they also bring some insights and some different perspectives on what processes they use today in their own human food facilities. And so that collaboration is helpful as well.
That's great. Tara, how about you? Any final thoughts on foreign material?
No, again, I appreciate the opportunity to collaborate here with Shannon and the Flexery team. I think, just as Shannon said, having the ability and transparency to talk with our customers, again, where pet food used to be very limited to pet food in a small community. So we're used to talking to each other, but where we're starting to navigate this cross with large brands being incorporated in the human food sector, we are starting to learn and understand with our customers, the other side of the industry and what technologies are out there, and integrating them as we go. So all in all, it's the collaboration within the community, the ability to discuss what we see in our small little network versus, some larger brands and companies that really help. Food safety shouldn't be a trade secret. We're all in this together to mitigate risks associated, whether it be for human consumption or for our pets, because at the end of the day, everybody that has pets loves them like family. So the expectation on their food should be the same.
Well, thank you guys, ladies, so much for sharing your expertise with us. We also appreciate everyone joining us today. Mike did put in the chat, but if you're going to be at IFP, we are hosting a roundtable specifically to foreign material on Tuesday morning. That would be July 29th. So if you're going to be in Cleveland, we would encourage you to join it. We have a panel of 4 to 5 people, and there are some pet food specific people on our panelists on our panel. So we're very excited about that. We appreciate you all joining us. If you have any other questions, feel free to send us a chat or contact one of your Flexery reps. But have a great afternoon, and good luck with all your foreign material opportunities.